It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. We are nearly at the beginning of a new Premier League season. And as I usually do, I like to do some form of Premier League predictions, general ones, just to get them out there. It's fun to do. A lot of other content creators and podcasters are doing it at this time of the year. This year, we are going to be more specific, 1 to 20. I'm going to give you my full Premier League predicted table for 25-26. Now, don't get, too angry if the table I'm putting up is not like yours, because it's just my table. You can give me your table in the comments below, why you agree, disagree, all of that good stuff. It's a bit of fun, and of course we will revisit this table and all of the predictions I'm going to give at the end of the season. For, of course, as I expect, the majority of people watching this who follow my channel, who follow my podcast, are Chelsea fans. We will have Chelsea-specific predictions. There will be a separate show all about Chelsea season. So there will, of course, be something about Chelsea. Chelsea will be placed in this table, obviously, but not as extensive. So don't worry about that for the rest of the week in terms of leading up to the Palace game. But let's jump into my predictions. Starting off at the bottom of the Premier League table. And I think it's best to just all in one go, the three teams going down. And I tried to kind of mix it up and find ways that the three promoted teams just don't go straight back down. But I find it still difficult. So I do think that Sunderland, Leeds and Burnley will all be heading back down to the Championship. I reference a really good YouTuber, Benjamin Bloom, who I've had on the show before, who's an EFO expert. I mean, he brings this up so often. The chasm financially has grown so much that you now have a settled 17 Premier League teams. Which makes it so difficult for those teams getting promoted from the Championship to compete and to be able to attract or maintain the quality of player to stay in the league. And I think that will remain the case this year. I also just look at Sunderland. Granit Xhaka signing is an exciting one, I'm sure, for Sunderland fans, but they have a very, very young squad under Reggie Lebris, and they of course were the playoff winners, kind of surprisingly so, against Sheffield United, so they were the last to get promoted, and I think they have such a young squad that maybe is a year too early to get promoted. Leeds are better in the sense that they didn't get promoted last year under Daniel Farke, but they had a full season, won the Championship, so logically they should be the strongest team. They do have players within that squad who played in the Premier League last time they were here, and because of the size of the club, I think there will be some people who maybe put Leeds outside the relegation zone, which is understandable for historic reasons. But I look at Daniel Farke as a coach, and his track record in the Premier League is pretty atrocious. I think his style of football maybe will be exposed once again. Will there be enough of a salvage job by a new head coach coming in, or will Daniel Farke prove that he has learnt from his previous errors in the Premier League with Norwich? Burnley, from a Chelsea point of view, I'm excited to see how Leslie Ugochukwu and Armando Broja do. But again, I'm looking at the head coach in Scott Parker, and not a good Premier League record at all. With several clubs, actually. If you think about Bournemouth, got sacked early on in that season, Fulham too. It doesn't speak to a club, and I think, in terms of the coaching that is going to elevate this team beyond those bottom three places. Above 18, 19 and 20, I have three clubs that I think are kind of red flag clubs that I think could go down if the promoted teams are really good this year and they are atrocious. The first one of those is Wolves. Although Pereira, I think, did a commendable job salvaging last season after Gary O'Neill left around November, December time, they've kept on losing really good players and not replacing them, and the struggle to replace them is something that I think is going to cause them to once again be closer to the relegation zone. Out Norrie this summer, Matthias Cunha this summer to the two Manchester clubs, and of course Pedro Neto left last summer for Chelsea. And I just kind of feel that Wolves have been slowly sliding down the table for a period of time now. And when you see that trend continue and it isn't arrested quickly, teams will find themselves dragged into the muck and kind of the dread of the drop down to the Championship. The next is Brentford. I am shocked that I have Brentford this low, but it's more the unknown of what Brentford post Thomas Frank and post Brian Mbeumo and Christian Norgard looks like. It's more so to do with Thomas Frank. And Keith Andrews, who of course has a lot of experience in football, I think is a pretty decent pundit as well, has obviously been part of that coaching staff and has worked his way up to this amazing opportunity. He is such an unknown. And how Brentford deal with losing the goals of Brian Mbeumo the leadership, and also just the wisdom, I think, of Thomas Frank, who's been such a brilliant presence for them for a long period of time. I guess if you're a Brentford fan, the thing that should give you comfort is it's worked around probably the knowledge that one day you would lose Thomas Frank, you would lose some of your best players, and the recruitment has always been top tier to keep Brentford as an established Premier League club. But that's why they're in kind of this list. The last in this kind of batch is West Ham. Graham Potter, although there are things about Graham Potter I like, he clearly hasn't connected at all with West Ham fans. There seems to be a lack of joy around that club when you listen to West Ham fans speak. Mohamed Kudus not just going to any rival, but going to their most bitter rival in Spurs is not good, and obviously takes a lot of creativity and quality out of the team. Callum Wilson coming in, I mean, is he going to remain fit enough? The reason I think West Ham will stay up is probably because they've got Jared Bowen. And I think he's such a quality Premier League player, along with maybe a couple of others, that will take them and elevate them enough to stay in the Premier League. But I don't think it's going to be a joyful season. And I wouldn't be surprised if Graham Potter is one of the first head coaches to depart from the London Stadium. We then move into this mid-table batch, I want to call it. Teams that maybe at times will have a poor start, have a poor middle, have a poor end, but they're not going to be as bad that they're going to get dragged into the relegation zone. And may at times actually through the cups or good runs of form, some good results, will have positive moments. First of those is Crystal Palace. Now, of course, all of the European drama that has happened off the pitch during the summer has really soured things after the incredible FA Cup win. But you saw what they did at the Community Shield. There is still a base of a very strong squad there by Oliver Glasner. And you've got to look at the Conference League as an amazing opportunity. You know, obstacles are opportunities. And that is what the Conference League can be for Crystal Palace. Like it was for West Ham, like it was for Chelsea last year. Crystal Palace could potentially go all the way and create even more history under Oliver Glasner. If they can keep both Eberechi Eze and Mark Gurhey, they've got such a solid squad there that I think actually they could be a lot higher. The only reason I've put them a little bit lower is I think the European football effects coming into play, and also if one of those two leaves, it's going to be hard to replace them. But I think the base of the squad is still very good, and excited to see what they will do in the Conference League, even of course it wasn't the competition maybe many Palace fans wanted after the FA Cup triumph. Just above them, and this is kind of going to be a new rivalry this year, is Nottingham Forest. I don't think Nottingham Forest are going to have a season anywhere close to what they did last year, and a bit like Palace, the logic being no longer one game a week, you're playing Europa League football. Unlike Palace, who maybe, especially in the early phases of the Conference League, can rotate a bit more, I don't think Forest are going to have that privilege. And it's also the case that Forest, they've lost Alanga, they've kept Gibbs-White, which is big, but they outperformed their metrics a lot last year, whether that be in attack, but also defensively. Playing that counter-attacking game works for Nuno Espirito Santo. I think it gives him, you know, an identity to the team. I think that club obviously suits him as a head coach. You know, is Chris Wood going to provide the goals? Who have they signed that is really going to take them to the next level? I think there was some maybe hope that after the season they just had, they would maybe invest heavily. But really, it's been a case of trying to maintain some of your best players. So yeah, I think Forest will not be able to maintain their form of last year, and I think they will drop down the table. Above them here is Everton. Now, I've seen some real positive shouts for Everton, despite the fact they're moving into a new stadium. They've got a solid base, a good head coach with defensive solidity under David Moyes. You look at the signings they've made. I mean, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, who I didn't really want as a Chelsea player, but I think could make his home very quickly at Everton in the Premier League. And Jack Grealish, as just before recording this, Jack Grealish, of course, is now on his way. And that is a very exciting signing. I mean, if he can return back to the Jack Grealish of the Aston Villa days, kind of a creative maverick, someone who has a bit more freedom. I could see Moyes creating a shape and defensive structure around him to give him that platform that he was never going to have under Guardiola at Man City. And also a player who probably has something to prove this year in Jack Grealish, because I think he still has real quality. And they've also maintained the likes of Ndiaye, if they keep Branthwaite, you know, players who, again, could have moved on this summer, but they've kept them. The new stadium is always an unknown quantity. Because if we look at Spurs, West Ham, Arsenal, when teams move from their historic, beloved home to a new one, there is an adaptation, and sometimes it affects results. Maybe the fans are trying to adjust to that new environment. There is obviously excitement with a new stadium and what that could bring, but yeah, I think Everton in the Cups may be a bit stronger. And absolutely, if things all come together, maybe even as high as a top 10 finish, and they've got some quality players within there. But I've just put them 12th because, you know, where they've been in recent years, and maybe that adjustment, new stadium, it is 12. Maybe that's a bit low for some people. You can let me know in the comments. 11th, Fulham. I mean, arguably Fulham are the most stable Premier League club because they haven't really let anyone go, but they haven't signed anyone as well. You know, they've still got Marco Silva in a role where he's done such a good job to make Fulham a club that once were the yo-yo club, really, and take them into a position where they are established Premier League club. And I wonder if ML Smith-Rowe, who I think was an exciting signing from Arsenal last summer, will develop more this year. Alex Iwobi is kind of more of an experienced Premier League player, seems to produce quality. Andres Pereira, I think, has found a nice home there. I just look at Fulham and I think slow and steady, I think they will stay in the Premier League again. I don't think it will be an extraordinary season because they haven't really improved that much, but I think the stability is what's going to keep them going and sustain them in the Premier League. Now into the top 10. 10th for me is going to be Brighton. They have lost João Pedro to Chelsea. Fabian Hertzler, of course, as head coach. It's interesting. I've heard I had some discussions with Brighton fans who maybe feel a little bit conflicted about him as a head coach, but didn't do a terrible job last year. I think the aim probably by Brighton fans would kind of have a season like they did under De Zerbi, maybe under Graham Potter as well, where they're pushing for some form of European football. I just ponder whether that's there and the quality of player, the recruitment to keep buying good players. This is the problem when you're not one of the top 6 teams, and it's not saying this from a position of arrogance or privilege. It just is the financial reality. They have bought and sold very well. To do that consistently and to still keep maintaining and being competitive is obviously a challenge. And it's also the fact that I think other clubs are going to be a lot better this year than they were last. I just can't see some other big clubs, really falling down the table, which is why maybe that will hit the likes of Brighton, who I think will be 10th. 9th is going to be Bournemouth. Yes, they have lost a load of big players. There's no getting around it. Dean Huijsen, Kerkez, of course, going to Liverpool. They've lost players to PSG. But I'm a big fan of Areola. I think he's done an incredible job at that club. I think the coaching is kind of the thing that triumphs here. But they've also kept Semenyo, Evan Nilsson. It's not like they've lost all of the players that made them an exciting team last year. And I just think as a Premier League team, in terms of intensity, physicality, no European football, so they will have the ability to keep going and recharge their batteries. The likes of Nottingham Forest are not going to have that this year. It's nice to have European football, but when you don't have the squad that can deal with it, it can become a pain and really drop you down the table. So Bournemouth for me, I think will once again have an impressive season and maybe can push for some form of European football. But for me, I'm looking at this top 8 and they're kind of all the names you'd expect in the top 8 historically, or at least in recent years, because I think that firstly, and I was kind of going back and forth between who finishes 7th and 8th. And they're the two teams that finished hilariously low last year. And of course, those are both Man United and Spurs. I'm going to go, it's tough. I'm going to go Man United 8th. I think if one of Sesko, Mbeumo or Cunha come good, I think Man United will have a good season. It's also the fact that they have no form of European football, which is a shock historically for Man United. But for what Ruben Amorim needs as a coach to instill a system, for what that squad needs, I think for what that club needs to get some unity and just some basic competence back in that dressing room, you do kind of feel like if they can have a season without a load of chaos behind the scenes and where Amorim is able to drill in that system consistently as a good coach with the players that have been brought in, and one of those big signings in an attacking sense really starts to flourish, I think Man United will become a bit of a threat. I think they will become a team that, all right, may not be able to challenge for the Champions League, but will be one that will probably be able to put in some really good performances and won't have the distractions, at least for this season. That will come later, and that's when you have to deal with that. But given all the mess that's been at that club for a long period of time, but you do have to throw some Man United tax on there. It's because Man United cannot have a low-key season. Man United as a football club they can't go under the radar because they are Man United. They are the biggest club in England. They're probably one of the biggest clubs, if not the biggest in the world. They attract so much attention. There's so much pressure and scrutiny on that club. And what could go wrong throughout the course of the season, I still can't see Man United being higher than 8th or 7th. Spurs, we see what Thomas Frank is going to do. This is his chance to step up to a bigger level. And hearing Daniel Levy, kind of the ambition is to win the league in a couple of years. I mean, good luck, Thomas Frank, is what I'd say. But I think Mohamed Kudus is a good signing. They're, of course, losing James Maddison for a long-term injury is a bit of a blow, but I thought Dominic Solanke, and I think in the long term will prove a good signing as well. And there is quality. I mean, Matthias Telk, he didn't have a great loan, but can he develop into something more now they've got him permanently? there are talented young players around. Lucas Bergvall, I thought he looks like a really talented midfielder. There is a base of players, quality players, and I also just think, as I talk about Man United tax, I'm gonna throw in Ange Postecoglou tax. Yes, he did win them a trophy, and that's massive for Spurs. However, tactically in the Premier League especially, he was horrendous. And I do think a lot will be praised and a lot will come to light by just having a coach who is not going to set them up stupidly, is what I'll say. And I do think that's why they will be a lot higher this year and probably gaining some form of European football. But with Champions League, that's going to be a bit of a test. So that's why I've got them a bit lower, and jumping all those places in 1 year, all the way back to the Champions League, I can't really see it. Into the top 6, I have got Newcastle in 6th. Just not a good off-season at all. Yes, they did sign Anthony Elanga. Yes, they are still pursuing certain players. They could sign Nicholas Jackson before the end of the window, but there's no getting around it. As I was literally preparing this video, we've had the news from Ornstein that Alexander Isak is refusing to train, is refusing to play again for Newcastle. You kind of feel like that's an unworkable situation, and just the nature of football is he will move. If he moves, that's devastating for them in terms of the goal output he's provided. And Eddie Howe, as we saw the last time Newcastle were in the Champions League, they really tailed, and they really tailed off, and physically they were drained by Christmas. I wonder if he can avoid that again, because if he can't, I think Newcastle are going to really struggle. And because they haven't invested heavily and being able to bring in a quality of player whilst also maintaining their best player, I mean, Isak as a player is transformative. I know they have good players. I know they have a base of a good team. The mood music around Newcastle doesn't feel that great at the moment. And I think that Isak saga has really dragged things down. And I just can't see them having an exceptional season. I think they will get European football, probably Europa League football, but I can't see it being much better. And if you take out the goals of Alexander Isak, what does that Newcastle team become? If they replace him with Nicholas Jackson, maybe Jackson in that environment can thrive a bit and develop further outside of Chelsea. But yeah, at the moment, it doesn't feel great for Newcastle, and I don't think I'm being unfair there. 5th is Aston Villa. This could be a Champions League spot. We have to wait and see with the coefficient, but given how many teams we have in Europe this year in England, I mean, it's the likelihood this is going to be a Champions League spot. But the reason I've gone with Villa, yes, they haven't signed anyone, massive. They also haven't lost anyone massive. Ollie Watkins is still at Aston Villa. He's probably going to provide you a good to really good level of goals, as we've seen in his Premier League career. Morgan Rogers as well, I think, is a very, very talented player who I think will only get better with age. So, and Unai Emery, again, you talk about coach. We can talk about individual players all we want, but I think coaches as well, and the stability of keeping the same coach is important as well. And Villa in the Europa League, I do kind of ponder whether, and I spoke to a Villa fan about this a couple of weeks ago, whether attention is going to turn at one point during the season. If the Premier League isn't going that well, attention will quickly turn to the Europa League as kind of the main priority. And I don't really blame Villa for that, because it's a trophy and it's a European trophy. And of course, it's a ticket to the Champions League if they can't attain that through the Premier League. And we know Emery is the Europa League specialist, really, isn't he? So I feel Villa, because of all of that, and if they can have a bit better luck in terms of injury record, I think the stability of the team will push them through and maybe put them in a healthier place than the chaos maybe and change that we've seen at Newcastle, at Spurs, at Man United below them. That's just my feelings on that. Now we're into the top 4. 4th, this is probably my most controversial one, if a certain segment of fans see this. But my belief is that the top 4 are not going to be that big of a gap to... I think the gap in points between 1st and 4th is not going to be astronomical this year. 4th is Arsenal. The reason I've put Arsenal here is because at the moment, I do not think there is a head coach or a club, specifically the head coach, under more pressure by his own supporters than Mikel Arteta at the Emirates. He is under so much pressure to get this season right. And by right, I don't mean getting a Champions League spot. I don't mean finishing second again. I mean winning the Premier League title or winning something big. The mood music around that club, as I spoke about with Newcastle, is not great. The momentum going into this season is not great either. They do have the base of a very, very good team. And the evidence shows us that they put up good to, at times, really impressive Premier League performances. Last season wasn't great. I think the table itself, the fact that Arsenal, you got to factor in, Arsenal were not pipped to the title by Liverpool. Arsenal did not put forward a Premier League title challenge. And I kind of wonder psychologically, like Arsenal in the start of that season, because Man City failed and dropped off, and Liverpool were the ones who took advantage of it. Arsenal kind of had this mentality and complex early on last season when everything was going against them and it was everyone else's fault. Whether it was the referees going against them, whether it was injuries, whether it was certain games going against them. They've got to get out of their mentality if they want to win the Premier League title. Any team that wants to do that has to progress beyond that. And I also just wonder tactically whether Arteta has kind of coached the attacking flair and really intensity, the scary intensity at times that he had in 22-23, which I still think is probably the strongest Arsenal have looked in a couple of years. And there were periods in the following season when they were challenging for the title. But I just think that the pressure on Gyökeres's shoulders is humongous. Maybe at his age, at 27, 28, he can deal with that pressure and he's ready to take that spot. Maybe Noni Madueke proves to be a really good player for Arsenal. But Bukayo Saka, if he can stay fit, has an exceptional season. And Declan Rice has another brilliant season for Arsenal. Zubimendi proves to be a really inspirational addition in central midfield. They have had some injury problems. If you can keep your best players fit, there is a stable of a very good starting 11 there. I'm not denying that. But I just kind of feel that if you look at their start of the season, Man United away, I think they go to Newcastle pretty quickly, and I think they also go away to Anfield. If early games go against Arsenal, I'm not being hyperbolic and not just trying to throw fuel onto a fire here. I think we know what the reaction will be, and it's not going to be good in the direction of Arteta. And I don't blame even reasonable Arsenal supporters for expecting something, because they've been told for years, to trust the process and to wait, and we will get there eventually. And I just kind of ponder whether clubs are either have caught up with them without them knowing it, or there are still better clubs that are just going to blow them out of the water over the course of the next season. So there we go. Third is Chelsea. Yes, I can't put Chelsea any higher. We will delve into Chelsea, the dreams of a title race, and what it means for the future in my prediction show. But I just think, Chelsea were not that far away from how Arsenal ended last year. And I think the quality of football I'm seeing from Chelsea at the moment is really, really good. And I feel if things come together from Maresca with the signings we've made that I do think have been positive this year, I think Chelsea can put themselves in a position where this time next year, Chelsea are one of the leading contenders to win the Premier League title. I truly believe that if it goes well. So I can't put us any higher than third, but that's where I'm going. Second is going to be Man City. There is maybe the revenge of Pep coming, and he is able to construct with his new players, whether that be Shirky. Of course, it was exciting to see how he does in the Premier League. Reinders, obviously, as a midfielder. I've heard rave reviews already with him playing for Man City. I can't believe Erling Haaland doesn't have an amazing season. I think he will hit some big goals again. I think he probably will be top goal scorer. And maybe all of that combines for Man City to excel once again and prove once again that they are the kings of the Premier League, and nothing really has changed. Liverpool had their nice year, but now we're going back to the norm really with Man City. The empire strikes back. Maybe that's what happens because you cannot put it past Pep with the way he's adapted, the way he's found new solutions to problems, and how I think reputationally and probably psychologically last season would have hurt him, how much City dropped away and how they were not a serious title contender. Really, I think for only the second or third time in his spell at Man City. All the other times they've either been winning the Premier League title. I think literally every other season they've been winning the Premier League title when they seriously compete for it. So I expect City will be in the title picture. However, I think Liverpool have to retain the Premier League title. They have spent, there's no tomorrow. I mean, they've brought in, obviously, Milas Kerkez, Frimpong, Wirtz, Ekitike. They are chasing Isak, and just in terms of the history of football transfers, when a player is agitating to move that much, a compromise maybe is found. And Isak going to Liverpool, yeah, sure, maybe there's some headache of Ekitike and Isak playing together, but if they have Isak, I think it's kind of game over, isn't it? I mean, the quality they would have in that attack with Salah, Virgil van Dijk, of course, remaining from last season. There is some doubt and maybe confusion about, the defensive and the balance between attack and defence. They've signed a lot of attack-minded players, and whether that balance is being lost a bit, Palace kind of exposed it. But there should be pressure. Liverpool are one of the super rich clubs in this league. They are not plucky underdogs. They are the Premier League champions. They've spent like Premier League champions, and they have a squad that should be seriously, if not winning, the Premier League title this year. So I kind of always laugh when I hear perceptions that somehow Liverpool can't compete. They can compete. Financially, they can compete. We've seen it this summer. It's whether all those players can come together, and with the churn and change for Arne Slot, who constructed a very, very good team that won the Premier League title kind of at ease last year, whether he can continue that this year, and whether the new players take a little bit of time, and that gives Man City, gives Arsenal, maybe gives Chelsea the chance to spring a surprise and make it a serious title challenge. I hope there actually is a title race this year, because we just didn't have one, and that should not be happening in the Premier League. So there we go. That is my 1 to 20. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your 1 to 20. Give your reasons. And as I've already said, there'll be a Chelsea-specific predictions. Player of the season. We'll delve into the Premier League title discussion and whether Chelsea actually can do what seemed a little bit ago quite impossible, and all of that good stuff as I usually do. So please like, subscribe, share this video around with friends and the podcast around with friends, and I'll see you again very, very soon. All the best.